afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Place in Practice April session. Please ensure your microphone's turned off, the chat function's on, and there'll be an opportunity to talk to each other during the session. Also, just letting you know, the session's being recorded and an edited version will be shared on the website. So welcome. To kick us off, I would like to acknowledge country. So Place acknowledges traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognises their continuing connection to lands, waters, skies and communities. We pay our deepest respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And as part of the acknowledgement today, we invite you to share the country you're joining from in the chat. And also, if you'd like to share one thing you've learned about your place that only makes sense to your place, a local insight, norm or rule of thumb, which as I looked at this, I thought, what is it about my place that is unique? And thought there is a street that makes no sense to anybody that doesn't live where we are. So welcome, everyone. So, Place in Practice, and I have seen that we have got a number of familiar faces. So for those of you who have heard this before, my apologies. But Place in Practice is obviously an open monthly 1 hour series for people working in place-based change. This is our fourth one, and today's is focused on data, but the previous one was around community governed structures, and we have been responding to where the sort of interest is that comes through from people in the sessions about where to go next. And the live recording from last time is in the chat also. So as I said, today we're diving deeper into data and introducing a practical framework built around 4 I's. And I'm very pleased to say that it won't be me talking the whole time, but we have a couple of the people from our team who I will introduce shortly. And in terms of where we will go today, so I will give you a bit of an update about some things that are happening from within Place, and then we'll hand over to Nicholas to take you through the place-based data framework, and then we will also hear from Patrick about a sort of live example around the Mona Aboriginal Corporation and the role of data. And then we'll have a breakout session with some questions where you can talk to each other and hear and learn from each other, and then come back in. In terms of the housekeeping, please use the chat function to share ideas and ask questions throughout. And we'll be using it later too. Keep note of any experiences or thoughts that come up as you go into the discussions. And as always, because we all like and need data, there is a survey link at the end. And we'll also talk a little bit about the summit, and there are some pre-summit engagement activities that you could register your interest into. So without further ado, look, there are more photos again. So I am Eve Miller, and I'm the Director of Data Evidence and Practice here at Place. And I'm very pleased to introduce Nicholas Hill and Patrick Cook, who both work in the Data Evidence and Practice team. And so Nick comes to us with a background in community research and has been working along community researchers to develop practical resources and family for individuals and families, community organisations, service providers and government, and looks after our data and impact area. And Patrick is a Kalkadoon and Gungalita man, founder and managing director of the Mona Aboriginal Corporation and data systems lead with us. He's joining us from Cubby Country today, and brings extensive expertise translating complex systems into practical, culturally grounded pathways rooted in Indigenous data sovereignty and self-determination. So unsurprisingly, today is Patrick's day. But before I hand over, I will just give you a bit of a rundown about some of the things happening and coming out of Place, and the links to all of these things will be in the chat there for you. So you heard it here today first. Place is launching a new podcast called Making Place Matter. And our first season, which is called Who Decides, is all about shared decision making, a foundation of place-based work. And it is available today. So go where you find your podcasts, and it's a really interesting set of sort of interviews and conversations, which are definitely adding something. I don't think there's ever been a podcast about place-based change, or certainly not in Australia. So enjoy that one. On our website, you will see that we have some training scholarships open. So the training scholarship program is designed to address barriers to accessing quality training for people doing place-based work. And there are a range of training programs that are available, and the support to both in terms of sort of financial, time, travel, etc., to be able to participate. So they are open and live at the moment through our website, and the links will be in the chat. There is also a training directory, which is a curated directory of different training that's available that aligns with the key skills and competencies framework that has been developed by our Enable team for place-based work, and it is a huge variety of training programs that are available. It couldn't be me talking without giving a big plug for our Place-Based Impact Summit in June. So the tickets are now on sale. We've had bursaries open. They close tomorrow for people from within place-based organisations to attend. And the summit is designed to bring together communities, practitioners, funders and government to have a collective conversation and effort at tackling the shared challenge around how do we define, measure and understand place-based impact, and in a way that makes sense across different communities but pulls together the shared sort of similarities to try and find a consistent way of both thinking about and being able to measure place-based impact. The program will be released in the next day or so. Ticket sales have been really strong. So if you are planning to come, we suggest you book those tickets, but it has been designed as a really interactive sort of action-oriented session. It's not a lot of talking heads. It is a lot of learning from each other and actually working together to try and find a shared solution. And the other piece related to that is that we have partnered with Seer Data to develop a really comprehensive community data workforce training program, which has 18 modules covering all elements of the place-based data work, and that will be launched at the summit also. Okay, now I'm going to hand over to Nicholas to take us away with the content. Thank you.
Thanks, Eve. I'm having a little bit of trouble with my connection today, so if I drop out, I apologise, and someone from the team might sort of step in while I reconnect. So before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people as the traditional owners of the lands I'm dialing in from today, and pay my respects to elders past and present. So before I introduce the data framework, I'll quickly provide some context for it. The data function sits within the Data Evidence and Practice team, and it responds to what we've heard throughout our journey kind of so far. And you can see some highlights here on the right about sort of what we've heard. Our role is to support PBIs to grow their capacity and confidence to work with data, facilitate access to relevant and usable data held by custodians, support the development of data skills and expertise across the workforce, and support collective efforts to demonstrate impact of place-based approaches, which is a strong focus of the Place-Based Data Summit that Eve just mentioned. So next slide, yeah. So we know data is important for place-based change. It helps communities understand what's happening, make better decisions, and show what's working. But as you can see from the previous slide, it can be difficult to know what data exists, how you might access it, and what it can be used for in the context of the work that you're doing. Place Australia has developed the 4I data framework, which you can see on your screen, to help people think about what types of data exist and why bringing them together can support place-based change. So this framework builds on the work of Thriving Queensland Kids Partnership and the Data Catalyst Network, and so a big thank you for their work that sort of made this possible. So if you look at the framework, you can see at the center we have the place-based data buckets or place-based data. So the 4 squares kind of breaks down the different data sources that you might draw on to tell the story about kind of your place for whatever purpose that might be. So that's community insights, government data, service data, and research and evidence. And then the outer ring shows the kind of the 4 I's or 4 purposes. So these are insight, inform, improve, and impact. The 4 purposes help you to think about what data you might bring together and why, for what purpose. So people tend to have an aversion to data. Like, how many times have you heard people say, I'm not a data person, but in the same breath tell you how important data is to their work? Building skills and confidence takes time, and we really recognize this. Data are the different types of information that you can pull together to tell a story about your place, the people who live there, what the community values, and what individuals and families need to flourish in their local area. Data can help communities to identify what is happening and explain why, explore what is needed, track change and make decisions, and understand impact. But it's important to acknowledge that data is powerful and can and has been used to misrepresent people and places in ways that undermines their self-determination. Communities should have control over what data is collected, how it is stored, and how it is interpreted. And 2 resources on our website unpack this that you might like to check out. So these are Understanding Data from a First Nations Standpoint and First Nations Data Sovereignty and Self-Determination. And so we go back into the center of the framework here. And so you can see here the 4 different types of data, the what. Depending on where you are located, what is accessible, and your experience and available resources, you may feel more comfortable or prioritizing working with certain types of data over others, and that's okay. So community insights are the experiences, knowledge, perspectives, and stories that individuals and families hold about their local area. These insights can tell you about a place, people's lived experience, community priorities, and the changes they're seeing and experiencing. Community insights can be gathered through yarning circles, community conversations, creative activities, storytelling, surveys, and observations, amongst other methods. So the next we have is government data, and this is often seen as the most important kind of type of data that you can use, but I'll explain why that may not always be the case. So government data is the information collected by agencies about populations, services, and outcomes in a particular, well, nationally, but also in local areas. So examples include census data, school attendance records, health and wellbeing data, housing and justice information. It can be difficult to access and use, and without combining it with other kind of forms of data, it can tell an incomplete story. So then we have service data. So this is the information collected by local services. So examples include participation numbers, client feedback, and outcomes. It can show what's working, what services are being accessed, and by how many people, and referral pathways, although it can be fragmented across different providers. And finally, we have research and evidence, which is the information generated through research and evaluations. Examples include academic research, program evaluations, and documented practice wisdom. Research can show you what's worked elsewhere and suggest what you might do in your place, but it doesn't always translate well into a different context. The, the different data sources can be used in combination for different purposes outlined in the framework. And I think it's the combination that we're trying to sort of really emphasize today. It's important to note that the four I's, or the four purposes, are interdependent and each one influences the other. The data can provide insight. It helps organisations to spot changes, identify emerging need, and build a holistic understanding of what is happening and what might be needed. Data can inform the work. It can support community priorities and shared decision-making. Collective decisions become easier when partners have a shared understanding of the problem. Data can improve practices. It helps communities understand what is working and what is not, and make meaningful improvements. And finally, data can show impact. It helps communities to track progress, measure change, and tell their impact story. So next, yeah. So you might be asking at this point, what data source for which purpose? No single source tells a complete story. They are more effective when used together. So for insights, population and service data can identify patterns and changes over time, but community insights will tell you why something is changing. So for example, school attendance data combined with what local families are experiencing might tell you something about what barriers are preventing kids from attending school. Kind of to inform the work, government and service data can surface an emerging issue, but community data explains why it's a problem. If population data shows young people aren't accessing mental health services in the area, talking to them can reveal why and what needs to change. To improve the work, service data shows what's being used and where gaps might exist, while community and frontline voices will tell you what changes are needed to make programs more accessible and culturally safe. And for impact, all four sources contribute, but government data and research often do the heaviest lifting. A statistic kind of showing fewer people accessing homelessness services becomes more compelling and grounded when paired with lived experience. What you emphasize will depend on the purpose that you're telling your impact story for and who your audience might be. How you use data will vary depending on where you are in your journey and the resources that you have available. What you draw on can and probably will evolve as your confidence and skills grow. So thank you for your time. You'll have a chance to talk about your experience with data in the breakout rooms. And so to ground kind of this more abstract discussion, I'm going to pass the mic over to my excellent colleague, Patrick Cook, who will talk about Mona Aboriginal Corporation. So pop any questions that you might have for Pat in the chat, and there'll be an opportunity for Pat to answer those questions at the end of his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas and Eve. Hello, everyone. There we go. Yeah. First off, I would like to acknowledge the PiP people whose lands I'm presenting on today. So Mona Aboriginal Corporation is a 100% Aboriginal-owned, community-controlled organisation founded in 2008 in northwest Queensland. We operate across Northern Territory and Queensland. Our founding vision is empowering our youth of today for tomorrow. And the On Country program is where that vision became a working model. Today, I will be talking on two programs, the On Country program and the Mount Isa Indigenous Radio Championship. So why those two programs and the championship? It'll unpack the data, so what we measured and what the numbers show, and the impacts, what shifted in young people in the community and in the institutions around us, and valuing how the sector should fund, protect, and recognise this work. So the On Country program was funded through the Youth Justice in 2020 to 2023, and the Mount Isa Indigenous Radio Championship was pretty much, we set that up from 2022 to 2024. So the foundation, realistically, we had three pillars, and that was the Indigenous designed, built from scratch by Indigenous practitioners, not adapted from a mainstream model. We had some trauma informed, so rhythm-based regulation through horses, land, and ritual, aligned with Dr. Perry's Bruce Perry's work on brainstem regulation, and the On Country, delivered where the identity lives, not in offices or institutions. The On Country program is the foundation of where we started, so for Mona Aboriginal Corporation. So the next slide shows what it sort of produced at the end of the day. So mainstream funders measure engagement. We measured formation, and we reported on both. So 236% of contract targets we exceeded over 3 years. We had 168 young people engaged against a contract target of 50. We had 0 reportable incidents across the entire 3-year program. For a youth justice cohort, this is pretty much extraordinary. Mainstream programs routinely log absconding, self-harm, violence, and property damage. We had none of that. So what we measured, so we came up with four markers, you would say, pretty much so. So the mind shift from why bother to what next. So the internal shift, rarely captured in standard reporting. Cultural aspirations, we tracked what each young person wanted to become, not just what they did. Aspirations is a leading indicator of life directions, realistically. Cultural connectedness to country, elders, kin, and identity, the anchor that made every other outcome possible. Pathway to work, cultural grounding was the foundation for training and employment. Young people could not hold down work until they knew who they were and given opportunities and stability within their framework. So the employment outcome, 15 to 20 of the 168 people transitioned into full-time work, roughly 9 to 12%. So mainstream youth justice programs would celebrate a 2 to 3% employment outcome. We achieved probably 9 to 12% because we treated cultural measures as leading indicators of employment, not as a soft add-on. So when culture is the measurement, employment becomes the outcome. This is pretty much the through line for Mona's measurement and philosophy. It sets up the matrix slides. That's pretty much the next slide on. So the engine of our program. So Mona's cultural values are not a decoration. They are the engine that drives the program's design and its impacts. Most evaluation frameworks skip the first column entirely. So the connections between culture and outcomes gets lost. So the cultural values, so country, identity lives on the land, programs held off country breaks that link. Elders and kinship, authority flows from relationship, not role titles. Yarning, the method of decision-making, teaching and healing. Identity, pride in who you are as a young leader, say Kalkadoon man, and a person. Respect and reciprocity, giving back, walking alongside, not taking without returning. In the middle panel, the program. So 168 young people were engaged, 236% of the target, 0 reportable incidents. So on a $500,000 a K 24/7 wraparound service we provided. So everything in this panel only happened because the left panel really existed in the first place. So the right panel, which is the impacts, what the program actually produced. So youth diverted from custody, judges offering the program as a sentencing alternative, police and courts engaging, calling to de-escalate, referring young people to us. We had the rodeo was a 100-year rodeo transformed. First Indigenous-led showcase in the event's history. Policy change, Department of Sports and Recreation, Arts Queensland, shifting practice. Model replicated. Queensland Youth Justice used the evaluation to build on track. So cultural values in systems changes out and the fund the engine, not just the fuel at the end of the day. So the next slide is pretty much the Isa rodeo had been running for about 100 years before we changed it. Our riders had always been there, but never the focus. No Indigenous business had ever traded. No cultural program. The ticket price kept our mob out. So the On Country had given us the confidence. Our young people were already responding to horses, country and elders. It was time to show the public what this looked like. So we co-founded the Mount Isa Indigenous Rodeo Championship with the Isa Rodeo Limited in 2022. So there were 4 firsts with that came out of it. The first Indigenous-led rodeo in Mount Isa history. The first Indigenous businesses trading, visible and paid. The first affordable rodeo, so $20 per adult and kids were free, when standard tickets had always been beyond most families' affordability. And the first Arts Queensland Showcase at a radio, our culture as the headline in year one. In a single 4-hour event, we had over 5,000 community come through, 120 of our riders, Indigenous riders showcased, and 6 Indigenous businesses trading for the first time over the Isa radio. In year 2, it grew 15%. Year 3, we brought international First Nations champions from New Zealand, the first Trans-Tasman First Nations radio at an Australian event. So the next slide is what happened to it all. So in 2021, we partnered with the Isa Radio Limited in good faith. We brought the cultural authenticity. They brought the event experience. We built the IP together, but they held the registered our business names. By 2024, we had won Queensland Reconciliation Awards, Golden Tourism Awards, and brought international First Nation riders to Australia for the first time. Then Isa Radio Limited went into voluntary administration. Every business name and methodology we built became a creditor asset. Glenclaw is closing the Mount Isa copper mine after 60 years. The state gave Mount Isa City Council $2 million in crisis funds, and nearly half was used to buy our radio IP from the administrators. They formed a new community committee by expression of interest. We applied, we were excluded, no written responses, just silence. It wasn't the first time. Youth Justice did the same with the On Country, evaluated us, didn't refund us, and handed our model to mainstream providers on track. As I said in the Courier Mail, they already stole our land, our children, and our languages. Don't let them steal your ideas too. So register your trademarks, secure your business names, get joint ownership in writing. Once your IP is gone, it's gone. So the next slide. So what does the data, impacts, and values? So you had program delivery. On country numbers, so 168 young people, 236 targets, 0 incidents, 15 to 20 to full-time workers. Community reach, radio numbers, around that, 5,000 plus community people, 120 riders, 6 Indigenous businesses. Some of the systems change, again, with sports and recreation funding, reframed Arts Queensland's first ever investment at a radio Queensland, police de-escalating partnerships, magistrates using On Country as a sentencing diversion. So the quiet cost, on track, our model scaled onto mainstream providers without us, radio IP purchased by Mount Isa City Council from administrators, mainly excluded from the new structures. Of valuing, what we came up with was the final five lenses: relationship impact, count what happens between the program and the system, police calls, judges, redirecting, elders walking alongside, the invisible labour, your elders, your families, aunties carrying unpaid work that holds the whole model up, fund it. Representational change, breaking 100 years of exclusion in a social outcome. IP recognition, when an Indigenous-led model becomes the basis for the next program, protect the origin structurally, not just in thanks. The full journey, fund the relationship that carries the work, not just one phase of it. So Indigenous-led design, produce delivery outcomes, community reach and systems change at a scale rarely seen in the community sector. Almost none of the value returned to the source. The 5 lenses on the right are how the sector starts to fix that. The data shows the impact. The impact reveals the value. The community sector now has to fund what it sees. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing both the sort of approach, which is remarkable in terms of the story is fantastic, and also the use of data and the development of a sort of a way of understanding impact that fitted the situation and does what it needs to do for the particular initiative for the community. Emma had a question that started with, "I love the shift from engagement to markers of cultural and mindset transformation, which are notoriously difficult to assess. How exactly did you measure those?"
Sorry, what was it again, Eve? Sorry. To measure from.
How did you measure the shifts in cultural and mindset transformation? She loves the shift from engagement to those, but is really interested in how did you measure the transformation in cultural and mindset?
Look, the transformational cultural mindset, I think, it was basically, I mean, the rodeo gave it a good point, basically, where you had 5,000 plus community members come to an event that was only 4 hours. So that's that sort of transformational measure that you sort of, it's unseen, but it's seen. That answers your question. Is that?
If not, we can do a follow-up. I am
We can do a follow-up.
conscious that
Yeah.
I'm not a great timekeeper because I get so caught up. We might come back to the question. And we will follow up. We are going to take you out into breakouts so that you can have some discussions yourselves. So the questions will go into the breakout room, but what we are inviting you to share and talk about together is thinking about the 4 I's framework, which have been the most relevant for your work at different points, and how did you use data to support those? So the I's, so what sort of data do you use, and what do you use it for? And thinking about your practice, what combination of data sets have been most useful? And again, if there's a sort of point in time. So we're going to pop you out into breakouts. There will be a facilitator in the room to unpack some of those questions with you. And then we will bring you back to hear from the groups in about 10, 15 minutes. Interested to hear from anyone who'd like to share about the conversation, whether there was something that sort of came out of it that is of interest to share, or you think everybody else would like to hear, or just a reflection from yourself as we are waiting for others to come back. Somebody take pity on me, please.
All right, Eve, let me help you out there.
Thank you.
I was just thinking, we were having an interesting discussion about how when you are talking about, say, government data or population level insights, that they don't necessarily work easily for communities. Either you've got lots and lots of work to do to manipulate so that you can bring them in and compare them to what you're doing and what's happening in your local context, or alternatively, they don't really match very well. And so, it might be those the sorts of changes you want to talk about, the things that are happening in your place don't necessarily match up with, how many 14 to 17-year-olds got a job or something like that. And so that's one of the real challenges in, okay, we might be out there wanting to use population and government data, but it's really not fit for purpose for a whole range of reasons, and that creates a bit of pain for people.
Yeah, definitely.
In our group, we were also discussing about the fact that the access of data and how difficult it is to have access of data when we are trying to access data from right now, and then what is available in the government sets are the ones which are 3 or 4 years old, and we are trying to identify right now what is happening in the community. So we were focusing on that part of it as well.
We had a similar discussion in our group as well about the data starting sort of from population data and then looking at what that means, but then people speaking with their community to get community insights and sort of seeing the disparities between the two yeah, so similar to the first group that shared back as well.
We spoke about, we fund a national program delivering place-based approaches, and we talked about how data is not equitably accessible across the country. And so trying to encourage the organisations that we fund to think creatively about data and maybe look in kind of unexpected places or connect with different groups in the community to try and access that data where it's not sort of available at a population level. And we also talked in our group about thinking about measuring the impact of doing things. That often we kind of get the information and the data to inform what we're doing, but we don't sort of close that feedback loop to understand the impact that that activity or program has had.
Interesting. There, I wonder whether there's an opportunity to sort of have some further discussion for people who are interested in just watching some of the questions come up in the chat, but some of the sort of tips and tricks about how people overcome some of the challenges, because I think they are commonly sort of shared challenges around some of these things. So we will certainly are planning out of the sort of post-summit to create some more opportunities for people to share the sort of practice about how they're doing some of this work, because it is the richer the data you can collect and the sort of the stronger the feedback loops, the more you've got to work with in terms of informing things and I guess your decision making, whether it's as an organisation or feeding back to community. We are almost at time. I am going to be cheeky and say, for those of you who are with us, if we could flash up yes, there it is, the QR code, while I tell you a little bit more about the summit and also some pre-summit engagement opportunities. If you would like to hear some more about that, please. So the summit, as I said before, really is a bringing together of the many of us who are really interested both in being able to support organisations on the ground to be measuring the things that matter to them and their communities, and to be talking about their work in a way that is meaningful both for them and in terms of the sort of change that's happening in community, but also in ways that help simplify reporting, continue to attract funding, all the sort of practical reasons why people use data on a sort of daily basis, as well as the sort of how it informs things. So what we are doing is bringing together people who are interested in being part of the conversation, who have the experiences, who have different perspectives. And so part of it is about bringing the ecosystem together. So it's not just community organisations, or it's not just government, or it's not just service providers, but it is, or funders, it is everybody together, sort of working towards finding a sort of shared solution to the collective challenge. We've got all sorts of different place-based initiatives coming to talk about what impact looks like in their community, how they know they make a difference, and also a range of different organisations and people who've done a whole lot of thinking about how do we understand that place-based approaches are different. And so we also have been doing a whole lot of research around what are the various frameworks and aligned sort of ways of thinking about change that happens at a community level, and are there some measures that might be translatable, applicable? And so we will share some of those and sort of gather views around those. And then we will also hear some of the different things that are happening at a sort of scalable level, where there are initiatives and innovative ways of both using data but thinking about collecting data to demonstrate impact, and a whole lot of room for conversations between people about what they know, what they're learning, what is possible, and all of which is to work towards the idea that could we find a shared solution? So it is shaping up to be interactive, so many amazing people coming to sort of share their experiences, which is often part of the challenge in this space, that you don't get to hear what others are doing and you don't sort of get to have those conversations. So we are hopeful that people will find it both a great sort of experience personally, but also will learn lots of things. And in the lead up to that, we will do a range of online activities where people can come and share their views. We will do a survey, but also some online engagement activities if people want to come and join the conversation if they can't actually be with us in Brisbane. So that's my pitch. Would anybody like to finish up with anything? Otherwise, I will say thank you very much to everyone for participating, and also to Nicholas and Patrick.